Hey everybody, Greg Reffner on the Contact Center KPI podcast, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. We have Mike Cowguill, Director of Consumer Engagement and Strategy at Capio, with us, and as opposed to diving into kind of some of the traditional KPIs that we dove into before, we're going to be talking leadership principles and kind of trying to tie that in some ways back to a KPI. So, Mike, please take a moment and introduce yourself. Excited to have you here.
Sure. Thank you for having me. As Greg had said, my name is Mike Cowgill. I work with Capio, and I am a director of consumer engagement and strategy. And I've worked in the collections industry for 35 years at all levels of leadership, from senior level down to buck team manager back in my youth when I used to run a team of 10 or 12 people back in those days. And I like to say that I'm kind of a veteran of the whole gamut of leadership within a very hard business like the collection agency call center world, and I like to think I'm just as adept out on the front lines, when I step out on the collection floor and interact with, the agents that are actually doing the really hard work in this business, to going behind the scenes into the boardroom and having to sell an idea or gain funding or whatever the case might be, on that side of the world as well. And I think that's something that I take a lot of pride in, is the fact that I can walk into either dynamic and hopefully people agree and think that I'm just as adept at either one.
Nice. Well, I've always found that in order to be a successful leader, you have to really know what it's like to be on the front lines, to have some empathy and understanding of what folks get, kind of go through every day.
Hmm.
So I think it's always good to, to have that experience when you're trying to then go and lead a team and motivate a team. So,
That is very true.
uh, yeah. So, before we kind of get into this topic, you kind of gave us a little bit of a background, which is great. We always like to make sure our listeners have some context as to like why should we listen to Mike. And so, 35 years you've been doing this basically as long as I've been alive. So I'm sure I'm going to learn a thing or two over the next 20 minutes. Um, but what does the Director of Consumer Engagement Strategy mean? Like, what does that job do?
So this position is a little bit different than most of my prior life's positions have been. This one doesn't entail me to command or oversee the operations of whole operations. This one is design development, taking an entire lifetime of experience that I've learned throughout the collections business on all levels, and kind of bringing it all together into an idea and development of how that applies to the modern world. So instead of having hundreds of people that I'm accustomed to having responsibility for, and all the day-to-day rigmarole that goes into having that responsibility, this one's a little bit different in the sense that it's just me and system developers and people that are much smarter than I am at programming stuff, and taking what's in my head and they becoming the artist of how to paint that picture of the image that's in my head of what I'm trying to design.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Um, So again, kind of letting some validity to kind of what we're talking about. Again, kind of what you do today, your background. I think this is a perfect person to talk to about kind of leadership principles. One of the things that we talked about when we were prepping for this podcast, Mike, was the idea of kind of a theme here, kind of getting a little bit more granular of common ways to not be an obstacle to your agenda.
Yeah.
As a leader, whether you have a team of 5 people or a team of 100, or you're a frontline manager working with a team of 10 agents, I think for our purposes, let's maybe keep it more VP, like director level. But I kind of want to focus and target our questions around this idea of how to not get in your own way,
Right.
basically. Um, so on our podcast, we like to get tactical. We like to make sure that there's very targeted information that people can take away from our conversation to then go and try to deploy out to their environment. So let's first focus on like why pick this kind of theme, common ways to not get in your own way. Why is this such an important topic for you?
Well, when you're a leader, at any level, ultimately you win or lose based upon what the people you're responsible for do or don't do. And as the leader, you have to own that responsibility. And continuing to get in your own way does nothing but interfere with your own success. For example, let's say you're responsible for hitting a number on your production floor, and you continually micromanage, and you continually berate people, and you continually are absent from the engagements that you have to have with your subordinates. To ultimately, they're going to fail, and you can sit back and blame them for it. Hey, they failed. They failed me. But the reality of it is you failed them, and through your failure of them, you ended up failing yourself. And that's a responsibility and acceptance that I think takes wisdom. It takes life experience. It takes the willingness to put your ego and your pride aside and understand that you're responsible for the livelihoods and families of other people other than just yourself, instead of it just being about you, and shouldering that responsibility. Now, all that said, trust me, when I was 25 years old, 22 years old, and I was getting my first chances to run a small team and to be responsible for other people's successes or failures, hey, I made all the same mistakes that anybody else of that age bracket makes. And that is, I make it about myself, and I engage them inappropriately, and I made bad decisions on how I led them or didn't lead them, and let the power go to my head. And we all do that when we're young because we don't understand the weight of that responsibility. You've heard the old saying, be careful what you wish for. It is so true about leadership. Be careful what you wish for. When you're 25 years old and you're thinking, hey, I want the big bucks, you don't understand what it means, what you're going to have to give of yourself to get the big bucks if you're going to do it right. Now, if you want the big bucks and a title just to sit in a chair and neglect people, and ultimately be the reason why you ultimately fail, sure, that's a great way to look at it. But if you really want to do it right and do the justice that your responsibility requires of you, for other people and their successes and failures, that's a lot of weight. What I found is when I hit about 35, 40, that reality began to set in. Those ideas and thoughts of all the lessons I learned in my 20s, of all the mistakes that I had made and failures that I had created myself, began to really kind of come to fruition in your mid 30s, and you begin to, as the years go by there, gain a different perspective of stuff.
Yeah. So kind of like being on the front lines in the trenches, right? You have to, you don't realize the responsibility and the weight that is carried of leading, the folks, that are on the front lines fighting that battle every single day. And so
Well,
as
you
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 get,
you 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 say, oh, geez, when I was 20 years old and I would look at a director or a VP or somebody in positions that I ultimately have held throughout my career, I would look at them and say, oh, they don't do anything. They just sit in a chair. And you know what? I hate to say this, but probably a lot of them did just do that, all right, because they weren't great leaders, and they were probably part of why what was failing around them was failing. They probably were just sitting there and sucking up money and enjoying a title and being and abdicating of their duties. But there were some that I'm sure weren't. And I've always, I've striven to not be one of the former, to be one of the latter, to really own that responsibility for others that you have to have. But again, as I say, I didn't always understand that at 25 or 30. And I had to learn the hard way, just like we all have to do, how to ultimately gain that wisdom and understand how to get the most out of people to get the most out of yourself.
yeah, earning your stripes is not easy. It's painful. You learn a lot of hard lessons along the way.
Yes, you do.
So let's get kind of specific here. So let's maybe pick two things that, maybe throughout your career, as you've gone up through the ranks, two things that you've seen like, hey, these are the things to not do. Like, don't do these two things if you're trying to get people to buy it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would say, one would be, don't misunderstand your role. One of the toughest things that I experienced in my late 20s as I was going from, supervisor to collection manager to director to senior director to master of the universe, as we all go through our life and our progressions, every level it requires you to play a different role. And the same role that you have to play as a director or a VP is not the same role that's appropriate for you to play when you're a supervisor. And for me, I love the action of being in the trenches. When I was young, I was hell on wheels, and I was the life fire of that collection floor. In my early days, I ran around 1,000 miles an hour and just dared everybody to keep up with me. And I was the driving force behind the enthusiasm and the passion that everybody around me had. And that worked really well, at the lower levels of leadership. But once I began to move up the ranks, and now I had collection managers and multiple teams, and ultimately multiple departments and different facets of the corporation that I was working for that was under my area of responsibility, I came to realize that I can't lead in that same way necessarily. I can't be as hands-on. I can't be as micromanagement oriented. I had to learn how to rely upon my ability to spot talent and develop and groom talent instead of just doing it myself. Because I can't, as you move up the ranks, you can't be everywhere all the time to make every decision. You have to end up hiring people, developing people, investing in people, and then leading them in a different way to become an extension of yourself. And I think that's the key is subordinates have to become an extension of yourself. You need to trust that they're going to make similar decisions that you would make and behave in certain ways that you would behave, in your absence, because you can't be there to do it all anymore as your responsibilities grow. And that was a tough transition for me as I went from enjoying being in the front lines with the bullets whizzing by my ear to now having to step back and watch other people, have the bullets whizzing by their ear and teaching them how to survive in a combat zone. For me, it was a distinctly difficult transition to make. So I would
Yeah,
say that's one, is understand your role and what your place in that role is and what it isn't.
yeah.
And secondly, I would say don't let your ego ride shotgun on what you do. Again, I'm not going to be, so high and mighty to say that when I was 25 years old, my ego didn't ride shotgun, because it probably did. I'm a pretty cocky guy, and pretty confident what I do, and it takes a lot to back me into a corner. But I've learned in my years, in my 50s now, to balance that, to get the good things out of those personality traits in me, but to balance it off with the wisdom necessary to not let them become a negative for me. You learn how to take your negatives and offset them with your positives. As you gain age and wisdom, you begin to be able to self-reflect and understand and accept what you are and what you aren't. When you're 25, you're everything, and nobody can tell you different. And I can tell you, ego and not being humble is something that was probably a struggle for me in my younger years. But what I've learned is people want to follow, and they will be loyal to somebody who is humble, and who carries themselves, in a way that is of a normal level. You know, Trying to always carry yourself like you're better than everybody else, and everybody else is stupid, and you're the only one in the room that's smart, and all those kinds of things. It may make you feel good. You may go home at the end of the day and thump your chest and be He-Man, but ultimately at the end of the day, that's just another nail in your coffin of failure, because ultimately your people are going to abandon you, or they're not going to work as hard for you, or they're not going to fight as hard for you because they don't like you. And they won't tell you that. That's one thing I've learned is subordinates will never tell you they don't like you, because they want to keep their job, right? But in their mind and in their heart, they don't like you. And if they don't like you because of how you treat them or how you carry yourself, because your ego and your your high sense of yourself is always riding shotgun on everything you do, they're going to quietly hate you, and they're going to quietly ensure you fail.
Isn't that fascinating that the only way to kind of learn some of these things is through age? Like, age is one of the greatest predictors of wisdom, right? Like you just have to learn some stuff through time. And the only way to do that is to do the time, right?
Yeah.
Kind
Well,
of go
the
through that
collection
period.
business is that wisdom concentrated, because everything about the collections industry involves your ability to get the most out of people. So every day, all day, from day one in this business, you're learning how to manage people, and you're getting an opportunity every day to learn these lessons. It's not like a lot of other professions where your engagements with people are on a lesser frequent scale. So it might take you a lot longer to experience these challenges that I'm describing, that you have to learn from and fail from.
Uh,
In the collections business, if you're perceptive and you're and you have the predisposition to be perceptive and to read between the lines and so forth, you're going to get a lot more opportunity at a lot shorter time span to experience all of these things. And I think that's a unique nature of this kind of an industry is because it is so dependent upon human beings and your ability to get the most out of those human beings. It's like it's concentrated wisdom.
Yeah. So we talked kind of, you were talking about on the front lines, right? Bullets whizzing by your head. And when you're 24, 25 years old, um, you're running around at 1,000 miles an hour trying to, just do what it takes to win, right? And then as you get older, how do you take that that knowledge that hey, you know what, Mike? You're not getting shot at. Like bullets
Hmm.
aren't actually whizzing by your head, but this is just as important.
Yeah,
Like you
it's
still need
tough.
that. Like how do you
I, I,
balance?
I I
How do you
still
balance
struggle
that?
with it. Yeah, I still struggle with it today. I mean, there was a principle that I kind of discovered in my late 30s. I call it overexposure. You know,
Okay.
when you're the general manager and you're running the entire company's operations, you can't afford to overexpose yourself, meaning you can't go out on the collection floor every day, every minute, and involve yourself in everything that your subordinates should be doing. Because number one, you're undermining their authority that you need them to have so that you don't have to be there to control every situation yourself, right? You need them to have the authority to do that in the eyes of the people that they're leading. And secondly, when you do have to step in and be the boss and be the decision maker and be the heavy in something, if people see you too much, then you're not going to carry the impact you need to have when you finally have to get involved and speak on something. And again, this is another ego-driven thing where people think I'm the boss, so I got to do everything and know everything and be everything, and you can actually do that to death if you want, and all you're doing is undermining your ability to influence people when you need to influence people because you've overexposed yourself and you've undermined your subordinates' authorities and ability to be that extension of yourself you need them to be. And unless you're there, nothing happens because nobody will move unless you're there to tell them to move. And when you're a general manager, when you're a director, when you're a VP, you don't have time to go give everybody an instruction of where to go. You have to have them be that extension of yourself to take some initiative. And what I always what I tell people is I would rather you do it and it be wrong than to do nothing. At least if you're doing something, we're making some progress. All right. It may not be the progress I want you to make or you wanted to make, but by gosh, at least we gained an inch. Okay. If you sit there and do nothing and wring your hands in despair and, oh my God, I'm going to step on a landmine and get fired because it might be the wrong decision. If you do that, guess what we gained? Zero. All right. I'd rather you make a decision and it be wrong. We can discuss later of how you could have made a better decision. But as long as it wasn't an immoral or illegal or unconscionable action you took that was wrong, you will live again to fight another day. And you will learn from that mistake and you will be better off in the future making those decisions. But it's not a landmine to make a mistake.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation with a couple of folks on my team, I think earlier this week actually, about like this was the wrong decision, but thank you so much for making a decision and not
Yeah,
waiting to talk to me
right.
about it. Because it
Exactly.
was like, was it the right decision? No. But guess what? We learned what not to do now. So go do that again, learn from it, but continue to make decisions.
Right.
And I think as a leader, it's important that folks feel empowered to take the risk, to make the decision, that they know that, hey, you know what? Again, you know, that this is not life and death, right? In what we're doing. It is important, but at the end of the day, we're all still going to go home to our families. So,
Exactly.
um, this has been awesome, Mike. I feel like we could probably talk about this for a
Oh, we
while.
could. I mean, this is such a deep topic. I mean, we could spend days and hours dissecting, the principles of how to not be your own worst enemy and how to get the most out of the people you need the most for your own success, which is your subordinates. We could spend days, hours, weeks, months. I could write a book if I like to write that much and took the inclination to do it. I could write a book on this topic, and it's not because I just woke up one day and said, "Oh, I know all this stuff." It's because most everything I know, it's because I did it wrong before. And I was fortunate enough to work with people at a young age that were willing to let me make those mistakes and be part of helping me put them into perspective and capitalize on my predisposition for learning and self-reflection. They recognized that, and they were willing to let me make the mistakes and help me learn the lessons that you have to learn on your own. I can, it's like your kids. You can tell your kids, hey, don't touch that stove; it's hot. Or don't go get in people's cars and hitchhike. All right, but kids are going to do it anyways, just because you told them not to. And you got to let them do it. You hope they survive. You hope they don't burn their hand off. You hope they don't get abducted by the serial killer because they got in the wrong car. I mean, you hope that they survive all of it. I've got a 30-year-old and a 26-year-old, and I can tell you from having raised a family, the kids do not listen. And I like to say that I wasn't like that when I was their age, but you know what, I was.
You were.
I was exactly as obstinate and did exactly the opposite of what my parents told me. But I was fortunate enough at a young age to work with people that saw something in me and were willing to let me make those mistakes and help me learn the lessons from them. And I try to play that forward with everybody I interact with and try to give everybody else that same opportunity.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, two boys, and my 4-year-old yesterday decided he wanted to like start helping to cook dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm totally as Claire promised tangent. Um, but like my wife was like, "Hey, don't you're gonna burn yourself," and he's like, "So what? It'll just heal, Mom." And I was like, you're too smart for your own good. But yes, you're gonna learn and you'll figure it out. But anyways, Mike, this has been awesome. I really appreciate the time. I think big takeaway for me is just that time is that greatest teacher, and then figuring out how to balance and have some reflection on your time on the front lines, dealing with debtors and kind of being able to put yourself in folks' shoes when you then go to try to get them to buy into what you're trying to do and kind of rally the troops.
Yep. And the
Um,
last thing I'll leave you with, Greg, is the idea that that people that the most valuable thing any leader, especially a senior level leader, can give to their subordinates is their time. All right, it's not money, it's not power, it's your time. If you put the time in on them, they are going to make you successful, and that is the best investment and the best thing you can give your subordinates is your time. And be willing to do that. Be willing to engage people on a one-on-one level.
totally, totally. All right, sir. Well, this has been awesome. I really do appreciate the time today, Mike. Thank you for your wisdom. And something tells me we'll be having you to join us again to follow up on this conversation.